Good morning, my beautiful babes and babies. I'm your resident active advocate, and I am here to talk to you today about the remake, not the original, of Freaky Friday. I've never actually seen the original, so I don't know how it goes down in that one. But in the remake starring Lindsay Lohan, it's an interesting movie that I think addresses a lot of different mental health problems. And I do call them problems in the context of this movie because they prevent the two main members of the cast. There's Anna, the daughter, and her mom. I can't remember the mom's name. I'm sorry, I haven't seen this movie in a while. Tess, that's it. They have problems with their relationship because neither of them has addressed the trauma of the father dying. Now, we are not informed of how the father dies, but we do know that it has put a major wedge between Anna and Tess. On the one hand, Anna is aggressive and closed off, and she doesn't want to talk to anyone about anything, especially when it comes to her emotions, and especially when it comes to her emotions about her father's passing. On the other hand, you have Tess, who is a psychologist. So one might put in the sort of stereotype of, well, if you're a psychologist, how is it that you can't deal with your own mental health? The whole issue here is that Tess believes that she has dealt with the mental health issues that surrounded her husband's passing. What ends up happening, though, is that through some rather interesting, and here's this movie's element of Orientalism, through some rather interesting magic that occurs when the two of them open fortune cookies that have basically the same message in them, like you're going to lose your identity and you will only gain it back when you have learned to understand the other side of the argument, basically is what this boils down to. When they open those fortune cookies the day after, they have switched bodies. So you get Anna's consciousness inside of Tess's body and Tess's consciousness inside of Anna's body. What ends up happening here is that they have to attempt to impersonate one another in order to pass for themselves in their respective worlds. Anna is a high school student. As I mentioned, Tess is a licensed psychotherapist. It's a lot harder for Anna in some ways than it is for Tess because Anna is not qualified as a psychologist. And from the very beginning, her mother says, no, you are not to give any form of psychological advice to any of my patrons, to any of my clients. That would be, it would be immoral, which actually would be true. It would be immoral. Just because she's in the body of a licensed psychotherapist does not mean that she is one. So Tess's clients all begin to kind of suffer under the change because they have no idea what's going on and why the person they usually rely upon is unable to help them or unwilling to help them from their perspective, because no one outside of the two of them knows that this change has occurred. On Anna's side of things, so this is again the mom in the high schooler's body. She becomes estranged from her friends when she tries to put restrictions on them based on what she perceives as being best for Anna. I don't want you in this band. You need to step it up and do more schoolwork. You need to be little Miss Model student rather than pursuing your own life path, rather than pursuing your own interests. I want you to be like me. However, Anna has the same conceit. I want my mother to be the cool mom. I want her to let me do what I want, let me eat what I want, let me go where I want to go, let me have my own life and pursue my own interests. The problem boils down with this to, between the two of them, a complete lack of communication. And the major mental health aspect of this movie is the fact that they are both suffering, as I say, from the trauma of the father/husband's passing, and that they refuse to talk to one another about it because it's too painful for both of them to open up. I have a pop-up. One moment, please. Hooray. Okay. It's too painful for both of them to open up, not only to one another, but even to themselves. They hide away from that pain because they don't want it to impact their lives. They don't want to have to register what's gone on. This is in some ways especially true for Tess because she has a new love interest in her life. And Anna does not like this man. He's a perfectly good guy. You see this throughout the movie. He's a very attentive to be stepfather to both Anna and her younger brother, who I haven't mentioned before now, but he doesn't figure that prominently in the story. Harry, the younger brother, it's not really known whether he's processed his grief. And we don't know either how long ago the father died. I believe it was 2 or 3 years. So Harry would have been significantly younger than Anna when this happened. Harry may not have been able at that point to understand what had happened or why it had happened. Anna, however, was definitely old enough to have understood. And it's her trauma and her past grief that is addressed in this movie, hers and Tess's. Tess, as I say, is able to move on to another relationship with a man she finds very loving, very supportive, and he's there for her and for her children. I really like that this movie does this aspect of a relationship very well, because in the real world a lot of people have a hard time getting into a relationship with someone who has children from a prior relationship. So when the stepfather comes into the picture, Anna hugely resents it, but doesn't want to open up to her mother about the fact that she believes the mother is trying to replace her biological father. When Anna does open up to her mother about her feelings, it actually happens at the wedding rehearsal. And what happens in this scene is very moving because Anna, as I say before, she's posing as Tess, as her mother, and is required at this point to make a speech in honor of her guests and in honor of the occasion. It's the rehearsal for their wedding reception, right? So what happens here is that she basically opens up her heart at last and says to the audience around her, but says primarily to her mother, no one could ever replace the father I had because he was a really good dad. But this new person in our lives, he's a really good guy. He is basically not a replacement, but he is pretty much as good as it's going to get when it comes to having a paternal figure in my life. And I, as your daughter, am giving you permission to love this man, to have this man in your life. And that on Anna's part is extraordinarily selfless because before this point, she had been looking at the potential stepfather, as I say, as a kind of competition to, as she saw it, replace her former, or like to replace her biological father. That, however, was never Tess's intention. I don't believe. But Tess also was caught up mentally, emotionally, because she could not move on from her husband's passing until she knew that her children were okay. This, I think, is where her training as a psychologist really comes into play because it's less about her and more about those over whom her decisions have an impact, namely her children. But she is also very open to the possibility of future love with this man. And she doesn't dive into the relationship at all. It's definitely implied that they've known each other for quite a long time by this point. It's more or less stated by Tess that she just wants what is best for her children. And through being in a relationship with another man, she is fulfilling what she sees as her duty as a loving and caring mother. She doesn't want her children to be without a father. It's not that she wants this guy to be a replacement. That's not the conceit here. She just wants what is best for her children. Anna does not understand that until the very end of the movie. Anna also does not understand that her mother has legitimately fallen in love again. And that, I think, is the most healing moment that Anna has, especially when she, in guise as her mother, talks to the stepfather to be about, like, Anna sees him as a bit of a hard ass, like the rule enforcer, the one who always sticks by the harder, more disciplinary elements of her mother's personality. And she says to him, I don't see you as more than someone who would see my children basically as more than obstacles, as more than something to have to be taken care of. But he says to her, this relationship is not going to work if you think that I see your children as add-ons, if you think that I see them as obstacles, if you think that I see them basically as superfluous to what you and I have going on between us. That's when Anna realizes that, oh, this man actually cares about me and my little brother and my mother. That's also a very important element of this because she knows, at least subconsciously, that Tess, her mother, absolutely cares about her. I'm sorry that I keep saying names, by the way, but it's kind of confusing if you don't offer context. But the guy says to her, I am a good father, or I am willing to be a good father, and I respect the hell out of the fact that you are willing to put yourself out there with another person, with another relationship, in order to do what is best for your children. So Anna realizes that he's not in this for any kind of selfish motivation. He's not even in it just for Tess. He's in it for the children as well. In other words, he's in it for the long haul. And Anna finally starts to see that, by the way, this is a good person. He's not a replacement for my father, but he is a good person and is what my mother needs. So the basic conceit of this movie is Anna, more so than Tess, giving up giving up on her selfish inclinations, giving up on her worldview in order to diversify and see things from her mother's point of view of, I want legitimately what is best for my children. And I'm not just thinking of myself, and I'm not just thinking that I need to be in control of my children's lives. It's that I really do want for them what is best for them. If that means being in a relationship with another person, then I am willing to put aside my own needs in order to make that happen. But the other side of this is that Tess has legitimately fallen in love again, which for her is great because love can not cancel out pain. If you lose someone, and for anyone in my audience who has ever lost someone, and I'm sure the vast majority of you have, if you lose someone, that, I know that this sounds cheesy, but that person never actually leaves you. You're always, if you knew them well enough, you're always going to have that lasting impression of, this person is gone now, and it might not hurt so much after a number of years. But just the idea of absence, that's never going to go away because we are a social species. Our lives are built around relationships with one another. And the thing that this movie does really, really well is that it gets into the minds of two people who have a very strained relationship, but it parses out why it is strained and how their interwoven mental health, how these two people have set one another up as opposites to the other. But that's because both of them are missing a critical piece of the puzzle. Anna is missing that Tess is legitimately doing what is best for herself and for her children, and she has to let go of her selfishness. Whereas Tess is missing that Anna is not over her father's loss and likely never will be over her father's loss, and that this is going way too quickly. In the end, though, it's Anna who has to be the one to say, it's okay, Mom. It's okay. You can go ahead with anything you want because I know that you are doing for me what is best for me as your child and what is best for yourself as my parent and as an individual. So I really do like the movie's whole idea behind relationships and mental health and how those things play into one another, especially when there is a blatant lack of communication. The first thing that needs to be fixed, shall we say, is the communication barrier. Much of the time going into therapy, people have a difficult time because they don't know how to communicate with their therapist because they don't know what's going on inside their own head. The whole idea behind therapy, I think, at least initially, is to get one's thoughts enough into order and one's emotions enough into order that they are able to communicate them. Even if the communication is a little bit spotty at first, and it probably will be, depending on the situation. But these things can be improved. And when we are able to talk to one another and when we are able to rely on one another for support, I've gone into this before, things will get better. It's not that it'll go away, okay? It's not a miracle cure that we're looking for here. But things can get better if we open up to one another because we are a social species. This is how we are built. No matter how introverted you are, and I've said this before, you are a social animal. And right now, in the middle of this pandemic, and currently my city is in lockdown, I think my entire province is in lockdown, we're cut apart from one another. And I think the best thing we can do, not only for ourselves, but for other people, is to try to be as in touch with one another as we can be. Example, I speak to my best friend / advisor on the phone almost every single night, and we just recently had a very lovely Zoom, and I saw her full face for the first time in months, and it was great. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, even if it's just preliminary stuff like, hey, how are you? Are you doing okay? How's your family? Just being with one another in one another's lives is a really good idea right now, both for others and for yourselves. So remember, communicate and be there for one another because it's the best thing you can do for yourself and for your entire species. Thank you. All right, so that is my video for today. Can't remember what we'll be doing tomorrow, but I have an official list, which I have finally bookmarked, so I don't have to keep looking for it on Google. But anyway, yeah, that has been my video for today. I know it's not an animated thing. I've been doing more live action ones lately, but we'll probably, yeah, we'll get back into animated stuff. Oh, Brother Bear, that's what we're doing tomorrow, but I have to watch Brother Bear first. So that'll be interesting because I haven't seen this one yet. All right, so I will see y'all tomorrow and have a lovely, wonderful, hopefully sunny where you are day. Mwah!